Welcome, everyone. I am Bob Wurzelbacher, the director of the Respect Life Office of the Archdiocese of Cincinnati, and this is our video podcast series that we call Being Pro-Life. Each month, we'll discuss a different topic in the Respect Life arena. We'll hear a personal story from someone deeply affected by that issue, and finally, we'll share ways that you can get involved. This month, we're going to talk about how to get involved on the local, state, federal, and even international efforts in the Respect Life movement, especially as it relates to abortion. And this week, we're talking with Ohio Senator Steve Huffman. Senator Huffman, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you very much, and thank you very much for having me.
Senator Huffman, before we get started, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself? Tell us about your background.
I was elected to the state Senate 2 years ago. I represent all of Miami, Preble, Southern Dark, and Montgomery County on the west side, including the city of Dayton. I had spent 4 years in the House before I moved over to the Senate. I was the very first practicing medical physician to ever get elected to the state Senate in the state of Ohio. I was the second to be elected to the House when I was there. So I continue to practice emergency medicine, and I find it gives me a unique perspective, especially on the pro-life issues. I grew up in the Transfiguration Parish in West Milton and currently belong to St. Christopher in Vandalia. I live in Tip City with my wife and 5 children. I've spent a year and a half overseas in the missions in the Catholic Church, practicing medicine, mostly in the Caribbean, but Africa, Australia. I've found that to be very rewarding.
That sounds like a podcast in of itself, the story of your mission work. You said 5 years?
No, 18 months over my career. I have led youth mission group to Catholic schools in Belize for 14 years. So last year, because of the epidemic, couldn't do that. And I've taken my wife and 5 children nearly every time that I've gone places. And I can proudly say, I'm a devout Catholic. My oldest daughter went to Xavier. My other 4 children went to Notre Dame.
Thank you so much again for being with us today, Senator. So let's start with some of the bills that have happened recently that's passed that we can talk about, and then we can move on to some of the bills that maybe are currently being visited, currently being voted on, or currently being proposed. So things that have passed recently in the Respect Life arena. I know we've got the fetal remains bill, the telemedicine, abortion ban, the heartbeat bill. Those are 3 that come to mind.
I'll start with the heartbeat bill. And God gave us hard work. That was first introduced about 11 years before it passed. It was hard work for many people in the General Assembly that finally got that done, and it's currently in the court. And I think that passing the heartbeat bill is, people didn't looked at it and said, it's not the time because of the Supreme Court. I don't know what's a better time besides now to push something like the heartbeat bill. It's currently in the federal courts, and hopefully it'll make it to the Supreme Court and be found constitutional.
I remember that very well. It kept getting voted down, or it was vetoed by the governor at that time.
It was vetoed, and then the House overran the veto when I was there, and the Senate missed by 1 vote. But that was very discouraging for many people. But I also looked at it that within 6 months, we were going to come back. We had a change in governor who signed it there, 6 months later. So that was in a good direction.
And it finally got passed. Was it 2018, 2019? I forget now. 2018.
2019, after the 18 election. Yep.
Right, exactly. So a couple of those other ones that we want to talk about.
The Downs bill. The Downs bill passed in 2017 that you cannot have an abortion based on the baby's genetic makeup that's Downs. Life is that precious that we should not be able to dictate male or female. We should not dictate if it's a Downs baby. So that was a very good bill that was passed.
Is that in place, or is that also in the courts again being fought?
As usual, it recently had a court hearing. There was a stay, and then it moved up to the next court, said that it was legal, but the next court said there was a stay. So it has not been implemented because of the court procedures. That's
the system, I guess.
Yes.
But you're doing what you can on your level. And then the telemedicine, maybe a little more detail for people that don't know what that's about.
The Senate Bill 260 was my bill that I passed in the last General Assembly, and it is to stop doing chemical abortion over the phone. This was introduced before the pandemic and became even more important during the pandemic, is that pro-choice groups were very proud that they were doing telemedicine where you could call up or go on the internet and find a doctor and say, I'm 6 weeks pregnant and I want to have an abortion. And they would say, that's fine. I'll call the pharmacy down the street. You go pick it up, take 1 pill one day, 2 days later, and you'd have an abortion. And there was people like in Planned Parenthood that was out there bragging that their number of abortions went up by telemedicine. And so we passed 260 last December and became effective 90 days later that basically said that if to prescribe those medications for a chemical abortion, that had to have a face-to-face meeting with the physician, and he had to be there when the first pill was taken.
Right. We had a whole episode in 2019 on the whole abortion pill, on that and what that is like outside of, the fact that it's an abortion, outside of all of that, even if you just are interested in women's health, right? Even if that is your concern, you should be concerned about that abortion pill. Not only does it kill the child, but it's pretty dangerous, and you shouldn't be just prescribing it over the phone.
And that's the gist of the entire bill. Was it about safety to the patient? And I will follow that up here in a few weeks with another bill, because right now those pills are supposed to be treated that way through the FDA. There's a concern that the Biden administration will relax those measures and take it off from the federal level, that you do not have to be in person. And so I'm going to have another bill that follows up that will require it in Ohio, even if the FDA in person is taken away, and have a registry of who is doing this.
Like the others, this is also being challenged in the court right now?
Yes, it is doing that too.
So other things going, either that have passed recently or they're just happening right now that you might want to bring up that you've been proposing? The
Born Alive Act. And to me, this has nothing to do with abortion, but has everything to do with abortion. So I have the privilege to have this bill in the General Assembly with Terry Johnson from Scioto County that represents Claremont County and East. He's also a physician. Basically, the bill says, to me, it's common logic, but that does not often, in the pro-life, the other side doesn't look at it. If a baby is born alive from a botched abortion, the physician and the caregivers must provide care. How simple is that? So there's no more argument of life and choice in the womb. This is life outside the womb. I just don't understand how, as a physician, you could look at life sitting there in front of you, as precious as it is, and not provide medical care and watch that fetus, that baby. At this point, it's a baby outside the womb die.
Right. So that one passed.
So this was proposed. Dr. Johnson proposed it last the General Assembly. I joined him this General Assembly as a joint sponsor, and hopefully we're going to get a hearing on that in the next few months. So,
do you have any sense of, okay, I think based on the makeup right now of the House and Senate, I think there's a really good chance that's going to pass. We know that on the federal level, we've been trying to pass that every 2 years for forever, and it's not happening.
No, I'm confident this bill will pass. My first cousin, Matt Huffman, is the president of the Senate currently. He is as pro-life as I am. His mother started Heartbeat in Lima, Ohio. And I think we both grew up as pro-life people. My father was a deacon in the Catholic Church in the Cincinnati Diocese. He was Deacon Bob in West Milton. And it was Cardinal Bernardine right before he left Cincinnati to go to Chicago. And I was 16, 17 years old, and I was the altar boy. And all I can remember at 16 or 17, I kneeled for 2 hours on the marble at St. Peter's and Chain Church. Wow. I mean, it was just at that age, I did not appreciate the historical and ceremonial things that were going on. I just remember that it really hurt to kneel for 2 straight hours. So,
I'm sure.
And at the end of his life and career, he developed a laying estate there for the diocese. My dad was an attorney in the 80s, represented nearly every pro-life marcher in the city of Dayton when they were arrested for blocking the entrance to the abortion clinics. And, many of the things that he did in the legal arena to protect the pro-life is still out there.
You come from a proud legacy. That's awesome. So you mentioned the Born Alive Act. Are there others that people could currently be contacting, right? Their representatives or senators about making sure they vote?
Sure. To me, the ultimate bill in right to life. Christina Rogner out of Akron has a bill that says that when Roe versus Wade is overturned by the federal court, then in Ohio, all abortions would go away in the state of Ohio. So we still need to get passed Roe versus Wade at the federal level, but then we need to come back and have a law in Ohio that says to stop all abortions. So her bill would say that when Roe versus Wade is overturned, there will no longer be abortions in the state of Ohio under state law.
Right. So that's being introduced, or we're working on trying to do that?
It has been introduced and working its way through the process.
Okay, let's talk about some things other than abortion. So adoption, for example, I think you have adoption bills that have passed recently or are in the works right now.
Last General Assembly, there was an adoption linked deposit program.
Okay.
So what's that? That is so that when people that want to adopt a baby, the state government will issue you a low interest loan so that you can then go out and have the money to be able to, because it can be expensive, to be able to have a low interest loan from the state of Ohio to go out and do that. And I think along with that were further tax deductions from your state tax to encourage people to go out to do adoption.
I think you have others also related to foster care. There are a lot more kids in need of families than there are families willing to foster. So anything that we can do in that area could be helpful as well. Do you have anything to mention in that area?
Yeah, so Representative Manchester passed a bill in the last General Assembly last September in regards to foster care caregiver training. It simplified, it made it more direct for foster care, because a lot of the people don't get into foster care because of the complexity and all the training they have to do. And so the bill kind of simplified it, because you want quality people into foster care, but we need to get more people doing foster care to fill that void because there's such a need.
Right, exactly. Are those bills that you're just mentioned, those are ones that have passed?
That have passed in the last General Assembly within the last 6 to 9 months that have taken effect.
So those are not tied up in the courts right now. That's
No.
good to hear. Right. Others in that arena? I think there's a couple others.
There was one that made Ohio Adoption Awareness Month a couple years ago, but Senator Coley had a bill about 2 years ago that changed the child support laws to update them. There was ratios and things that were kind of old, and kind of updated that to make it fair to both parents. So
let's move to the other end, right? Some recent things going on that help protect the elderly or people in nursing homes, that kind of thing.
Sure. I am the chair of the Health Committee in the Senate here in Ohio. And we have a bill called Esther's Law. And basically what it would do is would allow you to have a video camera in a nursing home so that you could watch your elderly family. They may have dementia, or you just have concerns, or you just want to check in. I mean, especially during this COVID, when the governor stopped all that, it would give you the opportunity to check in, make sure that they're doing well and that they're doing all right. So there's always a little concern about privacy with other people if you have more than one person in a room. So we're working through that, and hopefully I think it'll pass out of the Senate in the next month or so to go to the House to provide that assurance for people.
If that goes through, does that affect all nursing homes, or just like public nursing homes versus private ones?
No, it would affect every nursing home in the state, because they're regulated by the Ohio Department of Health. Since they're licensed by the state, they have to go by the state rules.
Others in that area?
There's not a lot more in elderly law that we're really looking at at this point. Yesterday, the Ohio House passed the biennial budget for the next 2 years. Your viewers might think that the budget is all about money, but in a state of Ohio, we have a lot of policy in the state budget. In that, more money for other things, for addictive services and nonprofits that do good things out in the community are in that budget.
So assisted suicide, I'm pretty sure it's 9 jurisdictions. We say that because Washington, D.C. is one of them, and 8 states. I think that was the latest count that have legalized assisted suicide. I know every now and then somebody tries to pass something in Ohio, and last I've heard, nothing like that is getting anywhere currently, at least in the legislature in Ohio. Are you aware of anybody still trying to push something related to assisted suicide in Ohio, as that isn't so much of a concern at the moment?
It's not a concern. I don't think that the current makeup of the General Assembly would have any appetite for that. I don't think anybody has tried to bring that up in Ohio for about the last 3 or 4 years.
Hopefully that stays that way.
Yes.
Oh, you wanted to talk about Ed Choice, though?
Yes. So I am a big proponent of Ed Choice in the state of Ohio, and it is truly a choice. My children were educated in the Catholic system, and I watched firsthand what it did to their classmates. And so in the last budget, we increased the amount per year to $6,000 for high school, and I think $4,650 for elementary school, and is really looking to continue to move that forward, because that does not cover the cost of a Catholic education, especially at the high school level. But we need to continue to move that up and make it fair. Recently we've had the Ed Choice expansion, which I think is bad. We expanded in the sense that the Ed Choice scholarships is based on if you're in a failing school district, and we've defined failing school district, and we redefined it last year. I think there's about 450 buildings in the state that are eligible, because if you're going to a failing school, you need a choice to go to whatever school that you want to better yourself. Ed Choice expansion then put it on a financial. So if you're under 200% of poverty, you could get an Ed Choice scholarship and go to, it didn't matter where you lived, and then go to a school of choice. At the end of the last General Assembly, we moved that to 250% of poverty, or about $64,000 for a family of four, so that you can still have a choice to educate your children. Also in the budget, we're looking to do some other financial things with transportation of Ed Choice scholarships. That is often a limiting factor for parents, is to get their kids to the Catholic school in an Ed Choice scholarship. And so we're looking in the budget, working with the Catholic Conference on how we can increase funding to get those kids through the school system.
Maybe a little bit of clarity on how that works. I guess if you are currently have your kids in public school and that public school is failing, right, you could switch to a Catholic school with that bill, correct? But
Correct.
If you were already going to a Catholic school, that wouldn't apply to you in that case, because otherwise everybody going to Catholic school would be able to get a voucher.
So you have to be going to a failing school and you can get a voucher, or you can have an income-based, less than 250% of poverty, and then get a Ed Choice expansion scholarship. And there's some other scholarships. There's the Peterson Scholarship for Autism and Special Needs that are out there for children on IEP that need added things in their education. The state of Ohio will spend extra money so that the Catholic schools will be able to take them. And we know those are more expensive children because they're receiving more services for the state.
I do know some families that generally send their kids to public schools because, generally speaking, a lot of times the services they need are available in the public school and may not be available in a Catholic school. That happens, I know. So this bill will help families get those services if they're going to Catholic school.
I think in different areas in the Cincinnati diocese, there's certain schools have certain programs tailored to certain special needs children.
Other things that I didn't ask you specifically you'd want to bring up in this whole arena.
The General Assembly is certainly pro-life in helping doing God's work in the sense that life is all sacred. I'll tell you another bill that I've sponsored. It had my first hearing a couple of weeks ago, is that to abolish the death penalty in the state of Ohio. And if we're pro-life, we need to be pro-life to the end of life too. Just because you're convicted of something, and there's one being that should decide if we live or die. That's God. The worst of the worst have to die, but through prayer and things have decided that we need to abolish the death penalty for a number of reasons. One, God is the only one to decide if we should live or die. The financial aspect, it is 2 or 3 times more expensive to put someone to death in the state of Ohio than keep them in prison for the rest of their life. To abolish the death penalty is to be sentenced to life without parole. Also, it's not a perfect system. 1 out of every 6 persons that have been executed in the state of Ohio since we restarted it back in 92, 1 out of 6 have been exonerated and left off death row because they were not guilty. I've introduced that bill with my joint sponsor, Senator Antonio, in the House. Representative Schmidt from Claremont County has a companion bill, and we'll see where it goes. Virginia has overturned the death penalty in the last couple of months. I think Ohio needs to go into that direction, but in Columbus, in the General Assembly, we'll continue to have a discussion, and hopefully we'll get there soon.
Senator, I'm so glad you brought up that topic. The death penalty was a topic for those listeners interested, in July of 2019, and we talked about how a lot of things you just mentioned. Not only are many people who are sentenced to death end up being exonerated later. Even that is only because they had a heroic effort of appeals process things, well, who knows what percentage, if they had great legal counsel, would also, in addition to that, and then depending on the state, you can get sentenced to death for a lesser crime than people think.
I had this discussion with a Supreme Court justice the other day, and he brought up the point that if two men go to rob somebody and something goes bad and one person shoots and kills the other one, the guy standing there that didn't pull the trigger, didn't do anything, can be sentenced to death without killing anybody. And I think another reason for the death penalty for me is closure. To put someone to death in the state of Ohio is around 20 to 25 years. And they sit there on death row. A story that I heard is that just a horrendous story. They killed their mother, the man and the two daughters. The two daughters they wanted the death penalty. The brother said no, life without parole, and they agreed with the prosecutor. And when I asked, he says, why did you decide that? He said, because for the next 20 to 25 years, him and his sisters would have to go and relive that in court every year to tell the judge, this is why we think you should kill this man. And there's never any closure. And now, granted, there's never any closure. You will think about the death of your mother in that way the rest of your life. But it would give them the opportunity that they didn't have to go relive it in a courtroom setting for the next 20 to 25 years until the death sentence was finally carried out.
Right. The way the appeals process works is what you're talking about. It forces the families of the victims to relive it. It costs the state a lot of money. We could go on, like I said, a whole episode on that. So July 2019, if you want to look at the archives of the Being Pro-Life series, we could talk about the death penalty, regardless of what it is, right? Some bill that what are you most proud of in your term, either as a senator or as a representative here in the state of Ohio?
I think my pro-life stance, the bills that I've introduced in pro-life, because to me, they're the easiest. And people look at me, well, I give no thought about it. It's life. There's no debate in my mind that what's right and wrong. It's life. And so those are the easiest things to vote for the heartbeat bill, to vote for the Downs bill, that you could not abort a fetus because of Downs. And for my background as a physician, it even comes easier in doing well for the underserved in the state of Ohio.
Thank you for talking with us today, Senator, for sharing your background and your work in the State House on pro-life issues, from abortion to the elderly to the death penalty. Thanks again for spending time with us today.
Thank you very much, and God bless to all your viewers.
And I want to thank all of our viewers and listeners for tuning in on this episode of our Being Pro-Life series. At the website to view more resources talked about in this episode at www.catholicaoc.org/beingprolife. Thank you again for joining us today. I look forward to being with you next time